Well, welcome to the kitchen fun, where quite frankly, I don't know what's gonna happen. So a little bit of backstory. A while ago, I was ordering some beef. Actually, I was ordering a quarter of a cow. And when you do that, they give you a sheet and you can check off like what you want and what you don't want. And on there was a check to say, do you want a couple of the, shall we say, less known or less used bits of the cow? And one of those is the tail. Now, I don't know that I've ever actually had oxtail or cowtail, because it can be from a boy or a girl cow. But what's typically in the cooking world known as oxtail, I don't know that I've ever had it. I was curious about it, so I thought, sure, let's see what we can do with this. And then, of course, it's been sitting in my freezer for a while, and every time I go in there, I think, man, I gotta find something out about that. So here it is. It's in the pouch. Now, they don't give it to you, obviously, in like one big long tail. They slice up it into these like about 1.5 inch long pieces with that big old piece of kind of like cartilage and bone in the middle, which I think is part of what makes them a little less used, because, you know, how are you gonna deal with that? Where you do find them used is in like Asian cooking. Actually, when I was in graduate school, we had a lot of South Korean students with us, and oxtail is a delicacy in South Korea, where they mostly use it in soups. So oxtail soup is a thing. In like French and Italian kind of cooking, you'll find it, and there you usually find it braised, which means that they kind of do a quick sear on the outside, and then like put it in a sauce and do like low, slow, almost like you would a pot roast. In fact, that's pretty much pot roast, right? I mean, you fry a big chunk of meat, and or you sear a big chunk of meat and you throw it in some sauce and liquid, and you stick it in your oven for however long it takes for it to come out nice and tender. And we do that with certain cuts of meat for a reason. Now, meats that have a lot of like fat in them, you know, fat will render, or basically kind of turn soft at a pretty low temperature. So really nice, well marbled, lots of fat, like cut a New York strip or ribeye or anything like that, you don't have to cook for very long. You just kind of have to get it warm and let the fat kind of break down a little bit, and then the meat will be nice and tender, because nobody really wants chewy meat. Things like this or chuck roast or things like that are a lot tougher to start with, the meat is, and they don't have as much fat in them, and they're also full of like connecting tissue, and connecting tissue doesn't break down at low temperatures. Connecting tissue has to get to a pretty high temperature, usually like 195, 102, 205 degrees, in order to break down and really let it get tender, which is why, you know, things like brisket and things like that have to be cooked for so long. So cowtail obviously fits into that category, and most of the preparations I could find have that kind of slow cook, treat it like a pot roast, use it in a soup, you know, take your time, use liquid. So for me, what I thought about is like, well, that's just crying out to go on my smoker, and which is something I really enjoy using even on snowy days like today, because that's how you get nice, low, slow cooking. But but I don't want to just throw them on there. I do think it's important to kind of surround it with liquid and you know, and do those things too. So we're going to try an experiment, and I've literally never done really anything like this before. I've never worked with oxtail before, but we're going to give it a try. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our piece of oxtail with a little bit of extra veggie goodness that we're going to blend up and stuff it in a tomato and cook it that way, and hope that the external structure of the tomato is strong enough to hold it all together. So we'll see how this goes. I think it's gonna be cool. Yeah. So here are our ingredients for today. We've got our oxtails all cut up. We've got some bacon that I'm gonna layer over the top of the tomatoes. We got bowls for what we need. We've got our magic dicing machine. Then over here we have our tomatoes. I went with kind of like a vine ripened tomato. These are not super red, and they're actually a little firm, which I'm hoping is actually a good thing for what we're doing. And then we got some onions and some peppers, salt, pepper, garlic, and of course our coffee, keeping it pretty basic. All right, so the first thing we're gonna take care of is this kind of onion chutney thing. And I'm realizing that there's gonna be some room inside the tomato. You know, I don't want just the beef sitting there. I want it kind of surrounded by stuff. So we want to give it some stuff that's going to add a little bit of flavor and also add some moisture. And onions are great for basically being little moisture batteries that when they get hot, release that moisture with a little bit of flavor. Onions don't have a strong flavor into whatever it is you're cooking. So they make a good base for this. So we're going to start with an onion and peel it. Just kind of cut it into rough pieces here. Pull off this outer layer. So you can try to get fancy with this and, you know, only pull off the kind of hard papery part. I like to just go ahead and grab the whole piece and call it good. And then we'll just kind of cut it up into some basic pieces here. Throw it in there, give it a couple of pulses. Now I don't want to totally mix that up completely or chop it up completely yet because I want to add more to it, and I don't want the onions to get so small, you know, or so diced up that they don't want to add the extra stuff. All right, so I'm just going to throw in a couple of these peppers. These are just little sweet peppers. Honestly, probably more for color than anything else. But you know, they'll add a little extra to it, which is nice. So a couple of those. All right, so now we got our friend here. This is a jalapeno that my wife actually grew in her garden. Normally, if I'm doing a lot of jalapeno work, I won't use my bare hands, and I probably shouldn't be now, but that's okay. I don't want a lot of this because I don't really want this spice to be the big thing, but I do want some. So we're gonna throw that in there. And then, oh, so careful with the blades. All right, I got a big chunk that didn't blend, so we're just gonna help the food processor out a little bit. Break that down. All right, a couple more pulses. Looking good. I am gonna go ahead and add some garlic to this because of course garlic, why would you not add garlic? I really don't know the answer to that. So just add like a heaping helping of garlic. And of course it's better to have like homemade or fresh pressed garlics from cloves and all that kind of stuff. But I'm also a little bit lazy and that stuff's still delicious. All right. I think we're good on our vegetable. I can definitely smell the garlic and the jalapeno in there, so that's good. But we don't have a lot, but we're not gonna need a lot. I think that'll be sufficient. All right, so now let's work on our meat. And here it is. So this is me literally for the first time ever in my life opening and encountering oxtail. I will tell you, everything else I've had from this cow, the brisket, and everything was really, really good. So I would expect that whatever oxtail is, this is a good example of it. So, I mean, it's looks like beef with a kind of with a center, you know, kind of thing there, which I suppose is the, you know, the cartilage, and there's probably a little or bone that makes up the tail, with a little bit of meat around it. I can see some fat and some connecting tissue I'm used to seeing in other parts of the cow, and especially like in ribs and stuff. This actually looks a lot like a rib, a beef rib, which of course are great on the smoker. So I think our cooking technique is the right choice. So we're just gonna pull all these out, put them in here. Doesn't really have like a strong smell or anything, but frankly it shouldn't. They're still pretty cold. They have been thawing in the refrigerator for a couple of days. Interesting, not a lot of like extra blood or liquid in the bag, so obviously pretty lean. So what I'm gonna wanna do is take them, and I think I'm gonna wanna cover them with some salt and some pepper, because why not? So I'll go ahead and just a little bit of kosher salt, a little bit of coarse ground pepper, and then just kind of mix them up. Almost like just like a basic dry rub, I guess. And this is really all the seasoning that I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna put it all on this meat because I don't want it to be overwhelming. But I'm gonna put it all in there and then hope that it just kind of gives it up to everything else. All right, now we gotta hollow out some tomatoes. So here's our tomato. Again, I picked the on the vine variety because I like them. And they seem to have a little sturdier structure, which we're gonna want. So I'm gonna get in there and kind of cut that off. Now, we don't want a ton of this inside pieces because we have to have room, well, for the tail. So we're gonna have to hollow it out. So I'm cutting that out. I've got my spoon here for it, and I'm actually going to save it in this bowl because you never know what you might need it for. And try really hard not to break through. All right, so now we've got our hollowed out tomato. That actually came out pretty easy. And so the plan is to take our vegetable mix here, spoon a little of that in the bottom, take one of our pieces of cow, kind of shove that in there. It kind of fits in there pretty nice. There we go. And then cover the whole thing with a piece of bacon, because what on earth could be better than that? So that's what we're gonna do, and I've got about 10 more to make. So let's get it done. All right, so our assembly went okay. I think in some ways this idea is still gonna work, in some places it's not. And honestly, the problem is some of these cowtails are just like generously large. I mean, they're just big, and I guess that makes sense. Cows are big and their tails seem small, but you know, one of them, as you can see, was just way too big for the tomato. So we're gonna need to do something else about that. I think what I'm gonna do is the ones that are just too big to fit into tomato, I think I'm just gonna wrap them in the bacon, just all on their own, and see how that goes. Now, to cook them, obviously we need to cook them in something, and we're gonna do a couple of different things. One is they are gonna sit in the smoker, and I want them in the smoke in the smoker so they get all that flavor. But when you do that, you get the smoke flavor in, which is great, but also all the moisture leaves. So we want them, you know, in the smoke and getting all that good stuff for a couple of hours. And then I want to be able to cover it and just let it cook until it gets up to those higher temps. At a certain point, the beef really stops taking in any smoke flavor anyway. So for that kind of duty, I believe that calls for our good friend cast iron. And for that, we're gonna be using kind of my big old pot here. This is an enameled cast iron pot. So we're gonna take the lid off for now. We'll put the lid on later, but we're gonna start arranging this way. And I've got some of my my chutney stuff left here, and I do want a little additional moisture in here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and stick that in there and kind of mix it on the bottom. All right, and then we're gonna start with arranging our tomatoes. And I think I'm gonna do those kind of around the outside of it for no reason other than it just kind of feels right to do it that way. All right, so here she is in final form. It took a little finagling to get everything and fit in there, but I think it's nice, and there's definitely plenty of room for it all. Probably gonna throw a little extra pepper over the top, and then out to the fire it will go. All right, that thing is stinking heavy, and there just was no way for me to walk outside and have the camera at the same time. So here we are. As you can see, it's in my smoker, which is a Traeger Timberline 850. Nice thing about this one is it's got a double-walled construction. So even though it is a little bit of snow on the ground out here, should still be able to hold the heat well. And for the couple hours we're going to be in here. The only downside of doing it in this kind of weather is you're just going to use up more pellets. So what we're going to do is we're going to start it off in the smoker with the lid down, or the lid off the pot, letting it soak up all that smoke flavor for a couple of hours on the super smoke setting, and then we're going to take it inside and just put it in the oven for finishing, because I'm not made of money, and that is a big bag of pellets, but I'd rather not use it all. Bye-bye, meat. So now we've got about a 2-hour wait while the smoky goodness happens, and we move it into the oven, and then we've probably got several more hours after that before we can even see or taste what we have done. So I guess it is that time. All right, it's been a couple hours, and let's see how we did. Ooh, hello, meat. That's starting to look pretty good. You see, we got some nice smokiness going on. The bacon's getting kind of almost like a dried out look, which is actually what you want to see. Looks like our tomatoes have held up so far. Yeah, I'd say we're ready to stick this guy in the oven. Alright, so now the smoker has done its job, and now it's time for the oven to do its job. Got it set at 275. I did check the temp of the meat, and it is sitting at like 150 right now. I'd like to see it up around 195, 200, just to get all that connecting tissue broken down. So I'm going to let this thing sit in here for probably a couple of hours before I check it again, and we'll see how it goes. All right, after a couple additional hours in the oven, it's time to take a look. All right, pull that out of there. Oh, it's so heavy. Take that off and... Oh, interesting. So the tomatoes and the onions and everything really have given up all their liquid, and we've basically unintentionally braised them, which I guess is a good thing? Yeah, all right, sure. So here we are. We have a done I guess, you know, again, never done this before, so I don't know what done looks like, but by temperature, the meat is where it should be. It's been there for a while. As I feared when I pulled it out of the pot, the tomato just sort of fell apart, and there's just not a lot of structural integrity left to the tomato. But it smells good. I mean, it actually smells remarkably good. So I'm just gonna kind of taste this in sections to start with. First with the tomato. Yep, I mean, it's a cooked tomato. You know, you can definitely pick up the, oh boy, there's the, there was the pepper we put in there. But you can pick it up, and it's definitely picked up a lot of fat and flavor and stuff from the beef. So they pretty much stayed together while they were cooking until you moved it. So it did pick up a lot of that flavor. So that's pretty good. The bacon on top, you know, again, looks like bacon. Well, tastes like bacon. Again, interesting, it's got like a extra little thing going on to it because of, I think, all of this. But now we come to the main event, which is this Cowtail. Now, there isn't actually, I mean, as happens, you know, it kind of cooks down. So there isn't really a lot of meat like on here, and it's weirdly, you know, arranged because there's just this massive bone and tendon, you know, running through it. So it's kind of like, reminds me of just the kind of the nooks and crannies of a beef rib, is what it seems like to me. But we got a little bit of the beef here. Yep. One shot. Okay, so no. It's really, the problem is it's really chewy, and like where the beef is versus, you know, where the actual meat part you want to eat is, and where the tendons are, like it doesn't work. Which is probably why they tend to use these things more in like stews and stuff to give flavor to things, rather than as something you're actually going to eat, because I can't even imagine that. It might be a little bit better in the bigger ones where there was a little bit more meat around the outside. I might try one of those. But on the whole, I would say no, this did not work. And that happens sometimes, and you get this great idea. And my original plan for today and for this video was actually to make a soup, and make something closer akin to what you'd find in kind of Southeast Asia, around cowtails. But I woke up with a brilliant idea, and I just had to try it, and I did, and I'm grateful for that. And frankly, I've got some delicious beef stock and some tomato and stuff. So what I'm probably going to do is strip out all the tomatoes and all the veggies, you know, in here, maybe run it through my blender and use it as a stock or a base for another kind of soup or something, because that would be delicious. So if I had done what I originally intended to do, maybe we would be okay. But we are okay because it was fun, and I learned something, and I got to try something, and I got to be creative. And hey, sometimes that works, and you know, sometimes it doesn't. So get out into your kitchen and try stuff and put stuff together and have brilliant ideas and invest a little bit of time and energy into it. Because worst case is you're gonna make something that you don't want to eat, and you'll look like an idiot on YouTube. But you know what? Hey, as life goes, it's not so bad. All right, so get out there, cook, enjoy, and looking forward to seeing you again on a future edition of The Kitchen Fun. Thanks for joining us.